Good day, everybody. This is Susan Elliott, host of Mean Lady Talking. I wanted to give you a little preview of today's episode. Today's episode is episode number 11, and we're talking about people that don't get over it. The first part of the podcast is going to be what people don't get over it. And this could even include people who seem to think they're over it, but they're not. And then the second part of the podcast is going to be, how do you know that you're over it? Or recycling, how many times you think that you're over it. And it's a little bit of review of the grief process, a little bit of review of working out the bad, working in the good, and how you get to the end of your grieving, and you get to the end of your grieving more than once usually, why that is, what it feels like, what's going on, and how do you know when you're absolutely positively over it for good forever. And you might have a situation I had when my book came out. I heard from all kinds of exes. I heard from my junior high school boyfriend to my graduate school boyfriend, and so many people in between. And I didn't speak to my junior high school boyfriend who was abusive, and he was the first boy I ever went out with, and he apologized to me. He said, I want to apologize for bad, and then his name. And my graduate school boyfriend said, I want to talk to you about your wonderful book. And he's actually in my wonderful book about what a bad boyfriend is. If you're in a book and you're being used as an example of a bad boyfriend, you don't get in touch with the author and say, let's talk to you about your wonderful book. No. He sent me email, he sent me Facebook messages, he's followed me on Twitter, I blocked him. I mean, it's like, leave me alone. Now, every single time I've had one of these things, I get sometimes angry. I sometimes perseverate on for a few days. I think in my head all these imaginary conversations I like to have with these banana heads. And then I move on like nothing happened, and then I tell a story like I do now. If nothing else, you have a good story. Now, the fact that I'm spinning around for a couple of days when these banana heads get in touch with me has nothing to do with the fact that I'm not over it. I'm definitely over my junior high school boyfriend, and I'm definitely over my graduate school boyfriend. I have no feelings whatsoever, and I never definitively went through what happened with my junior high school boyfriend, but I definitely went through it with my graduate school boyfriend. And the last story in this particular podcast about the woman she found her boyfriend cheating on her in January, he blamed it on her, blah, blah, blah. That story parallels what I did to get over my graduate school boyfriend. Very, very similar. When I heard it, when she talked about it, it sounded just like something I had done. So away we go. That's what this podcast is about. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Mean Lady Talking Podcast. This is the podcast that tackles tough questions about relationships, life, love, and loss. It may not be the advice you want, but is probably the advice you need. And now here's your host, grief therapist, motivational speaker, relationship expert, best-selling author, and attorney, the not really mean lady herself, Susan J. Elliott.
Episode number 11. I hope to get the last two episodes up that I have before we go to Tuesday and Friday. I wanted to thank everybody for the great reviews and for subscribing to the Mean Lady Talking Podcast. That's really helping a lot. And thank you for the emails letting me know what it is you want to hear about. Now, some of the mail that I've gotten has to do with getting over the relationship, getting over the breakup. A lot of people tend to think that they're not going to get over it. I want to let you know that Getting Past Your Breakup is the most successful breakup program in the world. When I was shopping the book proposal, and I've talked about this before, there were agents that said to me, the relationship space is dead, there's nothing new to say, and no publisher is going to buy this. And those of you who have the book know that a publisher did buy it, and that it is new. And the reason that it received so many positive reviews, which the amount of formal journalistic publishing reviews as well as the reader reviews are almost unprecedented for a relationship book. There's not a single review of Getting Past Your Breakup that was done by anybody that I knew prior to the publication of the book, other than a few people that I knew from the class, Getting Past Your Past, that was taught at the Learning Annex in New York City, or the Getting Past Your Past and the original Getting Past Your Breakup blog. Not a single friend or relative did a review of Getting Past Your Breakup. I just wouldn't allow it. And the reason why the reviews were so good and the reason why the book shows up on so many best breakup books of all time, and in 2009 it was About.com's Relationship Book of the Year, is because no other book gives you a program, a step-by-step way to get through a relationship breakup. If you follow the step in Getting Past Your Breakup, and I'm about to record a video series, and I have done in service for mental health professionals where I go to mental health agencies and I teach therapists how to work their clients through this program. And sometimes they even use it for clients that have mental health issues, for clients that are called dual diagnosis, which means they have a mental health issues combined with some addiction or alcoholism. And they use Getting Past Your Breakup with these clients. It is the most successful program in the world. So one of the things that people have been saying to me, and I've had this question through the entire time that it has been out there, the program has been out there, the book has been published, is how do I know that I'm not one of the people that this won't work for? Because I feel like I'm not able to move on. So this program is for them. Helen Keller was the person who says, when one door closes, another opens. But what she actually said, the actual quote was, when one door of happiness closes, another opens. But often we look so long at the closed door that we do not see what has been opened for us. And that's a perception issue. And that's one of the issues that I have identified over the years for people who don't, quote unquote, get over it. There are several types of people who don't get over it. And I invite you to send me email and I can follow up on this podcast. So send me email if there are other types that you can think of people who typically don't get over it. Now, I'm not saying that these types can't get over it. I'm saying these are the types that typically don't get over it. The first type is the person who refuses to acknowledge that they've had a loss, or they refuse to do any work that they need to do on themselves. As I've said over and over and over and over again, Getting Past Your Breakup is a program. It requires work, and it absolutely requires acknowledgement that a loss has occurred. There are people who repress the hurt, repress the anger, they refuse to deal with their feelings. It's all way too much. And then they simply go out and repeat the same mistakes over and over again. They haven't done any work. They haven't looked at why this relationship didn't work out. They haven't looked at the life inventory. What's my history of relationships? Why didn't they work out? They do none of that. They might do a little bit of emoting in the beginning, but then they either go on as if nothing happened, or they stay stuck in what appears to be a surface malaise, where they just feel kind of down, kind of depressed all the time. Nothing's really bad, but nothing's really good. They're just kind of They're just maintaining. They're just treading water. But life is not about maintaining. Life is about living. And if you don't deal with your feelings, and those feelings are sad, those feelings are anger, those feelings are hurt, those feelings are betrayal, those feelings are anxiety, those feelings are disorganization, those feelings are confusion. If you don't deal with those feelings, you can't get to the living. There are just people who just maintain this kind of hazy walking through life, and they figure, well, when I'm tired of doing this, then I'll do something else. But they never really get to the root of the problem. They never really look at what's actually going on. And sometimes their behavior is very dysfunctional. Sometimes they triangulate, they do these other things. They gossip. They focus on other people so that whatever it is going on with them, they don't have to deal with. So sometimes they're just maintaining boredom, and other times they're maintaining craziness and dysfunction. And I call them just maintenance crazy. It's like they're dysfunctional, very dysfunctional. They might kick up a lot of dust storms in their lives, but none of it has to do with what's really going on inside. And the problems never get so bad that they have to do something about it. I talk many, many times about the gift of desperation, where it's so bad you have to do something about it. It's like it's so bad. You cannot stay where you are. Something has to change. And that's where I got to. That's what happened in my divorce, where I had to go find something to change my life because I could no longer live like this. And that was terrific. That was the gift of desperation, even though it hurt like hell. That's what happened. But there are some people where they just refuse to go there. It never gets bad enough. And that's unfortunate. I mean, other people might look at them and say, hey, they just moved on. They didn't really look at anything. They weren't really in a lot of pain. They just seemed a little hazy, a little like blah. But they never really hurt. They never really fell apart. And some people are jealous of them, but there's nothing to be jealous of because these people never hit the bottom they need to hit to turn things into something different. The next type is a type that seems completely the opposite. They're people who get stuck in the emotional and they never seem to get out of it. What they don't realize is that although talking about your feelings and feeling your feelings results in healing and cleansing, at some point you have to make a decision to move on. People get stuck in the emotional. They've become very used to feeling bad. They want others to feel sorry for them, and they're generally unable to get past it and move on. They just get used to feeling bad. They get used to being a sad sack. They get used to kind of letting people know, oh, I'm still so hurt. And what they don't understand is that even though you haven't done all the work, you've done the bulk of it by feeling your feeling. And even though you still might continue to feel bad to some degree, you have to make a decision to move on with things. You work out the bad, which is the feelings, which if you're in this emotional state, spinning around in emotions, you're hurt, you're angry, you're anxious, you're confused, you're this, you're that, that's part of it. But the other part is you have to work in the good stuff. You have to do your affirmations. You have to do your goals. You have to do your dreams. You have to figure it out. What do I want out of life? If you're just constantly spinning around in the emotions, you're never going to get over it. That's not how it works. The third type of person who doesn't get over it is somebody who perseverates on what the ex is doing. And you won't allow yourself to be sad or grieve because the ex seems so happy and you refuse to waste any tears on that ex. You have to stay out of the ex's new partner and out of the ex's life. Otherwise, you're going to stay stuck. There are people who say, my ex did XYZ. My ex was unfair to me. My ex had an affair. My ex was the bad actor. And I'm not going to give that person 1 minute of my time. And they're like the first type, except that they become, the first type is just somebody who's kind of muddling through. And the third type is also muddling through, but they're muddling through while paying attention to the ex. Like if the ex suddenly had a clinical depression and was hospitalized, they might be able to do their work. But as long as the ex seems happy, they're not doing anything. In every single scenario, no matter what it is, There comes a time where you have to make a decision to move on. You have to make a decision to grieve in the beginning. You have to make a decision to take care of you while you're doing that grief. And as I've said so many times, you cannot do all of the work of grief unless you're also doing the self-care and taking care of yourself. So you need to make a decision. I'm going to feel the feelings. I'm not going to worry about whether or not the ex deserves these feelings, because these feelings are not about my ex. They're about me. It's my feelings. And while I'm doing this emotional bloodletting, I'm going to take care of myself because I need a break from the grief. I need to take care of myself. I need to do my affirmations. I need to journal. I need to let all my feelings out. I need to take care of myself. I need to do the relationship inventory. I need to do the life inventory. I might need to do the mother and father inventory. But I need to make a decision to do these inventories. I need to make a decision to go and do this work. And then at some point, when I feel like I've done the work, I need to make a decision to move on. You must give yourself permission to feel as bad as you really feel, but you can't stay there forever. After the most severe feelings have passed, meaning the days of endless crying and nights of sleeplessness and missing work, or doing whatever it is you're doing, you need to do the relationship inventory. You need to see in writing what it was and let it go. The purpose of the relationship inventory is so that you review it, say what you need to say, bury it, and move on. Again, make sure that you're not in a whirlwind of emotion before you do the relationship inventory. You cannot do it if you haven't gone through all of the emotions. That's not the time to do the relationship inventory. You have to be more grounded than you are in the early weeks and months. Then, after you do the work, you must make a decision, a cognitive, affirmative decision to let it go. There's a goodbye letter that needs to be written and needs to be said out loud in front of a friend, in front of a therapist. You need to take these affirmative steps. It might even be symbolic, but you have to do it. It's a matter of self-discipline, self-respect, and self-affirmation. In order to get where you're going into your new life and then eventually into a happy, healthy relationship, you have to let go of where you've been. There's a time in the middle of this process where you're obsessing about your ex, but then you need to turn to your stuff and do your work. There's a time in the middle of all this work where it becomes necessary to make a decision to move on. You've cried, you've walked the floors, you've moped around, you reviewed it ad nauseum. You've had every emotional reaction that there is to have. It's time to begin to recognize that you have changed, that the memories don't quite sting the way they did. You don't want to be a victim of your hurt, and you need to journal about that. You need to sit down and write. I don't want to be a victim of my hurt. I don't want to live in the past. I've gone through the past. I've gone through the inventories. I don't want to live there anymore. It's luggage you don't have to drag through the airport any longer. A day comes when you realize it's time to move on. If you haven't yet cried your tears, cry them. Think about your thoughts. If you're full of self-pity, think about all those who have less than you. Think about those who are not as fortunate as you are. Make gratitude lists. Gain some perspective about life. There's so much to be found in the thoughts of a recovering person, and it includes gratitude and perspective about how others are suffering in ways that you are not. Let's put this breakup in some kind of perspective. And that doesn't mean to minimize your feelings. It doesn't mean to say, oh, I'm not going to feel my feelings because I don't have it as bad as others. But it means at some point in the emotions, you have to say, hey, wait a minute. This is getting a little ridiculous. I'm going over the top. You have to build a new life. If you're refusing to do new things or meet new people, as in friends and support groups, not date, or find new interests and hobbies, remember, hobbies interest friends, hobbies interest friends, then you're choosing to stay stuck. You have to change things from your wardrobe to your surroundings, especially if you and your ex live together. Get rid of the trinkets and the mementos from vacations, all of that. Just get rid of it. In YouTube, I have Relationship Court where I talk about what to do with the ex's stuff, what to do with your stuff. It's called Evidence and Notice. Look it up on YouTube. Change your schedule. Change your way of doing things. Change your life around. Don't try to keep doing the same life you did with your ex. I remember one relationship that I had. I would always go shopping on Friday nights on the weekends when my ex had the kids. I dropped the kids off at 7. We would meet like halfway between our house in a public place so that he didn't go off on rants, whatever he did. And on those weekends, my boyfriend would come over on Saturday morning and stay until noon on Sunday. And I would always buy these breakfasty type stuff and snacks. So the first few weeks after the breakup, I would go to the supermarket on Friday night and I would just wander around. I remember being in the supermarket and just pushing the cart up and down aisles and not putting a thing in it, not knowing what the hell it was I was doing. I just wandered around the supermarket and I would start crying and I had nothing in the basket. And then I started to realize, like, this is stupid. Why am I here? I don't need to be here. Nobody's coming over on Saturday morning. And I hadn't even thought about it. I just kept doing what I had done before. So change your routine. Change your schedule. Change things up. Otherwise, you'll be stuck. If you have cried your tears, if you have walked the floor, if you have written it all out, talked to friends and therapists, and you're still caught up in it, you have to make a decision to turn the page and turn it now. Living life is a decision. Decide what you need to do to move on. Decide to do what you need to move on and then do it. There is a quote by a man named Blaine Lee, and he says, any change, any loss does not make us victims. Others can shake you, surprise you, disappoint you, but they can't prevent you from acting. They can't prevent you from taking the situation that you're in and moving on. No matter where you are, no matter what has happened to you, you can always do something about it because you always have a choice and that choice gives you the power. Each of us has the power to decide whether or not a hurt, a loss, a change in circumstance is going to keep us down. Each of us has the power to say no more to someone who is hurting us. Each of us has the power to walk away and look at our inner selves instead of trying to get whatever it is we're trying to get from someone else. And it comes down to choice. I know that I've had clients. I've been doing this work for 25 years. I've seen almost every type of client that there is. And I've seen the people who say they can't get over it. And another type of client who seems to not be able to get over it is a client who thinks that they're just going to wake up one day and just be over it. They think that it's the equivalent of being tapped with a magic wand. Presto changeo, move on. But true moving on, as I've been saying, is a choice you have to make. It doesn't come easily. I mean, sometimes, even though we've done our emotions, we've started taking care of ourselves, we've been doing our affirmations, we've done our inventories, there's still a part of us that's holding on, that doesn't want to say, I'm over it. I'm not going to think about this person anymore. There's just some part of us that's hanging on to it. And we don't admit it. We don't look at it. We don't acknowledge it, but it's there. It is normal and healthy to feel horrible after a loss, especially if it's unexpected or unwelcome. And sometimes, I've done most of the breaking up in my life, but I've always felt I was forced into it. Like, this relationship has gotten to a point where I cannot handle it anymore. I have to leave. I want to stay with you. I love you, but I can't. Like, you're mistreating me and I just can't stay. So even though I've been the one who's broken up, I'm still the one who's hurt and upset. I'm hurt and upset over the way I've been treated, and my hand is being forced here. We do the work that involves crying, being angry, being depressed, unenergetic, hazy, forgetful, etc. And then we start to feel better. And Getting Past Your Breakup acknowledges breakup grief. It was one of the first books to acknowledge breakup grief. Now it seems like everybody's jumping on the bandwagon. But you go, and the last part, and the reason why I always use the word phases instead of stages, because stages seems to indicate that you go from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3. With phases, you go in and out of phases. It's like a teenager. It's like a teenager could be in a phase where they're trying cigarettes, and then they, put them down and they're off because they're playing hockey. And then they go back to trying cigarettes again. Then they go back to playing hockey. Phases is something you can go in and out of. So you don't just, stages seems to say to me, I don't know to anybody else, but to me, stages seems to say you go to stage 1, then you go to stage 2, then you go to stage 3. So I don't like to use the word stages of grief. I like to use phases. And I did not come up with that. Beverly Raphael is the person who came up with the phases of grief. And then I read a book called 7 Choices by Elizabeth Harper Neal. And most people know that I absolutely love this book. She's a English professor, so her writing is magnificent and her research is impeccable. And she talked about Beverly Raphael's use of the word phases. Elizabeth Harper Neal said when you talk about stages, which is something I always thought, it connotes a neat crossing over from one to the next. And it seems to suggest that grief is a linear process. And anybody who's been through it knows that grief is anything but a linear process. It's a messy process. So Beverly Raphael called it grief phases, and then Elizabeth Harper Neal grabbed onto that, and then I grabbed onto it. So Dr. Raphael's work became a cornerstone of my own. I read it. Elizabeth Harper Neal's bibliography and 7 Choices is amazing. And I read all these things that she had referenced in her book. And that's why I insisted that both Getting Past Your Breakup and Getting Back Out There had pretty comprehensive bibliography. So Dr. Raphael's work became a cornerstone of my work because when you chase recovery, which I did, many times one book leads to another and another and another, which is why I have the bibliographies of my book, because if people are really serious about learning about this stuff, about figuring it out, I want them to know where to go next. So grief process is very often 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And recycling is very, very normal. And it's normal to quote unquote break the rules of getting better. What we need to do is to be vigilant when we're recycling and when we're purposely or accidentally breaking the rules of relationship recovery. We need to stay vigilant as to where we are, what we're doing, and why we're doing it. Is this normal recycling? Or am I kind of pushing things along? Like, what's going on here? Rarely do we progress nicely through one stage and then the other. It just doesn't work like that. So I urge people to think of grief in phases, where one might revisit any phase more than once for no clear rhyme or reason, but also think about, am I pushing this process or am I letting it happen? Because sometimes we are getting ourselves stuck in one place when we really don't need to be there. Recycling is more of a surprise. If it's not a surprise, you might be driving the train, and that's a dysfunctional train to be driving. So at some point, whether you think you're ready or not, and everybody thinks, I'll know when I'm ready. No, you won't know when you're ready. At some point, and I usually tell people, when you cannot stand the sound of your own voice anymore, when you cannot stand talking about your ex anymore, you write one more journal entry where you're telling your ex that you hate their guts and you're ready to throw your journal out the window. That's the time. Start to clue into you getting sick of the whole thing. You might not feel ready, but it's time to make what Elizabeth Harper Neal calls the turn. We all need to get to the point where it's time to decide to move on. We need to make a decision, a cognitive, unemotional decision to turn the page. It's about thinking. It's about your brain. It's about a choice. It's not about being pulled to and fro by the emotional process. It's about stepping out of the emotional process and deciding your brain needs to be in charge right now. Before you make the decision, you absolutely must honor your grief and your feelings. Even if your ex was a horrible person, you lost something precious, which is the dream you once shared together. Even if your ex is a narcissistic, sociopathic, gaslighting mess, you once upon a time didn't know that, and you had the hopes and dreams for a bright future with what you thought was a wonderful person. You once started on a journey and that journey is gone. You have to grieve those hopes and dreams. You have to grieve your secondary losses such as a house or a pet or your ex's family or friends that you cared for, people you cared about, groups you felt a part of. You have to go through all the emotions of a breakup that I detail in Getting Past Your Breakup. You have to read the books, build a life, journal, develop boundaries. You have to do the inventories in GPYB and the standards and compatibility inventory in Getting Back Out There. You have to read other books recommended by others. You have to change the person you were in your last relationship, because if you don't, you're just going to attract the same kind of person, or you're going to do the reactionary thing and go with the exact opposite, which isn't going to be good either. So after you've cried, gotten angry, walked the floors, journaled, talked to friends until you can no longer stand the sound of your own voice, taken time off work to stay home and pull the covers over your head, stop going to the gym, eating all the wrong things, drank to excess, slept with the wrong people, on and on and on. It's time to say no more. I'm done, I'm done, I'm done. And move toward turning the page to the next chapter. Many people say, what is next? I don't know what to do. And they just like spin and spin and spin. What you need to do is turn the page on the boo-hooing and the bad behavior. It's time to wake up with a new determination. Get back to the gym, stop smoking, stop drinking or prowling for a warm body or letting the ex with the warm body in. It's tough when things get quiet and it's uncomfortable and sometimes tough to take. But enjoy the quiet. Enjoy the solitude as a way to get in touch with you. Unplug the computer. Turn off all the distractions. Listen to yourself. Even if it's uncomfortable, figure out what is it about the quiet that makes you uncomfortable. You have to sit with your thoughts and feelings in order to be strong enough for a healthy relationship. Healthy people do not need nor do they want endless distraction. Put the phone away when you want to take it out. Learn to have control over the phone and the computer. They don't have control over you. Turn the television off when you realize you're not really watching anything. You're just clicking through all these channels. You've DVR'd all this crap that you're not watching. This is called making peace with the peace. This is called the quiet, which is the quiet is evidence of your life working. It's a sound of being free from a tense relationship or difficult people or your own endless bloodletting emotions. Think of the quiet time as me time, as time that you're shoring yourself up and making yourself stronger for the future. A good future needs a good foundation. Start building that foundation today. Take time out of each day to affirm yourself and the things you're doing for yourself. Confirm your commitment to yourself and to the process of healing. It's time to step back and cleanse the heart, the soul, and the body. Think, meditate, get a massage, take a bubble bath, do something nice for yourself. Use the time after grief to change you. 7 Choices by Elizabeth Harper Neild is one of the best books I've ever read. And even though it starts out where her husband dies, I recommend it to all my clients who are going through a breakup. I have read many books on grief. I think I've read every one ever written, but this one is very special. It's a book about love, loss, and healing, and I recommend it to anyone, no matter where they are in the healing spectrum. I was already a certified grief counselor and had done a ton of research before I read this book. But I found this tremendously helpful and interesting. And one of the 7 choices is the turn. The turn is the one choice you need to make as a conscious decision that you have to move on. Like all the other phases, you might have to take the turn a few times. But at some point, you have to affirmatively, cognitively, and rationally decide it's time to move on. The turn happens after you have emoted enough for 10 people. You've read and meditated. You've developed boundaries. You've explored the past. You plan for the future. Everyone, including you, is sick of listening to all the wrongs done you by your ex. It's time to stop stewing and start living. Now is the time to decide. You decide to finally let go once and for all, and you move on. And then you might slide backwards, and the next thing you know, you're back where you were before the turn. But you have to do it and be committed to doing it. Sometimes a failed turn is a sign that you have more work to do. Sometimes it's a sign that you need to be stronger about your commitment to making the turn. I had a friend who led a therapy group with me, and she told one of our clients who struggled with quitting smoking, never quit quitting. One day it will take. So never quit quitting. Never quit taking the turn. A client of mine found her boyfriend cheating on a cold, snowy January day. They had just talked marriage the month before. This is when I was practicing in Massachusetts. Not only did he cheat, but he attempted to blame her because she wanted his debt paid down before they got engaged. He said that she had spoken to him like he was a child and made him feel less than a man. So he sought solace in the arms of another woman to prove he was a man. This was all the things he tried to sell her as to why his cheating and their relationship problems were all her fault. She was a mess when she relayed this story to me. But when she relayed this story to me, I almost burst out laughing. What a poor excuse of a man who would blame all this on her and then decide, oh, I have to go seek the solace of another woman because of how terrible you make me feel. She was heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken. She spent the rest of the winter journaling. She wrote very long, sometimes angry, sometimes sad, sometimes confused, and some very humorous and some ridiculously long letters to him. She wrote long diatribes about him, the relationship, and every thought or feeling she ever had. She wrote about the last conversation. She wrote about his refusal to take responsibility for anything. She wrote about the woman that he was with. She wrote about what angered her, and she began her journal entries as letters to him where she poured out her anger and her hurt and her how dare you do this to me. She called him every name in the book. She cried, she laughed, she threw things, but she poured her heart and soul into every journal entry. She had a lot to say. She did some hobbies and she did some socializing, but she was focused like a laser on getting this out of her system no matter what. She didn't send any of them to him, though she wanted to. When she would come to therapy, she'd say, I want to send him this, I want to send him this. I would say, give it to me, let me read it. When friends would ask her what she was doing for the weekend, she would say, I'm staying home and I'm screaming into my journals. And then she would sometimes watch some non-romantic movie over and over again. She said she watched The Dirty Dozen a dozen times one weekend. Everybody thought she lost her mind. I mean, she was doing these crazy things. She was not the type of person who would find a movie like The Dirty Dozen to be, on her hit parade. And there she said she watched it all weekend long. The first weekend in May, she realized that she had spent all weekend pouring her heart and soul into the journal while he was busy doing whatever he was doing with whoever he was doing with. She was looking at a journal and realized she's repeating the same letters and the same sentiments that she'd been saying for months. She had nothing new to say. She also realized that if she didn't decide right there and right now to stop writing, to put a period, she would stay locked up in the house forever. And now it's spring and she doesn't want to be in the house. She's been journaling since January. She told me that she imagined herself as an embittered old lady with flowing white hair and crazed eyes rimmed with dark circles, cackling like mad and stabbing the paper with her pen. To avoid that fate, she made an affirmative, cognitive, emotionalist decision to end it, come up from the basement where she had her office and she was writing all of this and live life. She made the turn. It's not that she never had another emotion or added another page, but the daily commitment to doing this and to stay home on the weekend was ending. She cried, she'd been angry, she called him every name in the book, and she was now noticing that there was just absolutely nothing new in her journals. It was an endless loop of what you did to me. The journals had served their purpose. They were used as the outlet for her pain and anger. And what she did instead of calling him and raging at him, they were used as her outlet for her pain and anger and what she did instead of contacting him. But after 4 months of this, it was time to live again. It was time for her to greet the day and plan the rest of her life. Several weeks after this decision, it was only weeks, she met a man at a picnic where she would not have been if she still was staying home on the weekend and dealing with these journals. So if you are like her, it is now time to decide to eat healthy, think healthy, and be healthy. Define new goals, short-term and long-term, and start putting life back into perspective. The grief process is normal and necessary after a breakup, and we're not taught that, and too many people short-circuit it, and too many people don't even know how to do it or how long to allow it. But at some point it has to end, and it's not going to magically dissipate one day. There comes a day where you have to figure it out and you have to say, I've had enough. Many times in the grief process, through the phases, you have to make a decision and leave all your feelings out of it. It's not just when you make the turn, but other times as well. But sometimes if you're hanging on to feeling bad for way too long, it's time to decide that it's time for it to stop. And just like every other task in the grief process, in the breaking up process, in the healing process, you can do it. At some point, you have to let go with all of your might. You have to positively and affirmatively decide it's time to move on, to do the things you need to do to set this ship right once and for all. Even if you've been here before, even if you made the turn before, you can do it again. At some point, it's going to be the last time you do it. Redecide, recommit, return to where you need to be. If you're in that place, turn the page, decide to move on, and then move on. You can do this. Thank you to the people who have asked me if there are people who don't get over it. The grief process can be very confusing. It can be very, very confusing. And that's why I write about it. That's why I speak about it. That's why it sometimes seems like I say the same things over and over again, because we're not taught how to do this stuff. And sometimes you have to hear it. I mean, I have grief books I have shelves and shelves and shelves of grief books, shelves and shelves and shelves of academic grief books that you're not going to find at Barnes & Noble. And I have the books you find at Barnes & Noble. It's very complicated. We're not taught it. People don't understand it. And the world tells you, oh, don't waste your tears on that person. There's plenty of fish in the sea. You just have to stay busy. You just have to do this. You just have to do that. And that does not result in our healing. The process that is laid out in getting past your breakup and getting back out there is the process that results in healing. And you can do it. And I've told people the reason why I talk about my own stuff all the time is because I feel like I've had a fairly severe life history. But if I can do it, you can do it. I absolutely positively believe that if I can do it, you can do it. And I know you can do it. So please, please, please. The only people that don't get over it are people who don't do the work. The work can seem scary. The work can seem overwhelming. The work can seem like I am never going to get over this. I'm going to feel this way forever. But that's not true. Grief ends. Bank on it, believe it, and know that you can do it. This is Susan Elliott, Mean Lady Talking. Stay tuned. Subscribe, give us reviews, and thank you very much. Remember, you can do it. Take care, all.